Hello, my angels, and welcome to this episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. You're going to be excited today because today we're talking about the plant of the angels. We're talking about Angelica. How are you, Liz?
I'm very excited, but also, do you know, I feel a bit nervous about talking about Angelica. It's it is a really, well, it's called the root of the Holy Ghost. So this is a big thing. It's not a basic oil. It's a very special oil. So I hope that we can do it justice today.
Now, I believe that you and I may be working with different species of the plant because the only Angelica I have is an Angelica root. Its Latin name is Angelica sinensis and it's from China where it's called Dong Quai, which I believe the normal Angelica is normally called Angelica angelica.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's around about 30 different types of Angelica.
Mm.
The main ones that are used, there's about seven used medicinally. Usually the essential oil that you get is, yes, Angelica archangelica, which is called garden Angelica if you look in a herbal book. Angelica sinensis is called forest or wild Angelica. The properties are really, really similar of them. The reason why you have limited access, I would have thought, is because it's native to cold areas, so not an Australian native at all. Usually Scandinavia, although it grows really well in my garden, and my garden does get very hot because it faces south. So it's clearly been kind of pushed and pushed genetically to be able to do that. But yeah, it's a plant of the cold lands.
Now, when we're talking about Angelica root, it is another one of those. Oh, sorry, Angelica, the plant. It is another generous plant, giving us a couple of essential oils, one from the root and one from the seed. Now, I haven't actually smelt the seed one before, but I must admit the root, probably on initial sniff, I'm not going to say angels come to mind.
No, and the same applies to the seed. That doesn't. Um, I think that the root is not quite as grubby as valerian when we were talking about it the other day, but you can tell its root similarly. It is quite
Mm.
earthy, but it's got this sort of ethereal kind of aniseedy note, and you get that more in the seed than you do in the root. Um, there aren't huge differences between the oil, except for one fundamental difference in terms of safety, and that is that Angelica root is phototoxic. So we shouldn't use old oils of Angelica root. Angelica seed, I don't think is. And the reason why it oxidizes is that the chains kind of join together, they oxidize and then degrade. And you can actually see that happening with Angelica root oil. So when you get it new, it's kind of yellowy gold color, and then over time it goes sludgier and sludgier and sludgier till it's like the ones that I've got, because I don't want to throw them away, that are like the bowels of a swamp. It goes really thick, a bit like murders. When you've had it too long, it goes really thick and doesn't come out of the bottle. So, and unlike something like patchouli that gets better with age, Angelica definitely doesn't. It's probably got a shelf life of about 2 or 3 years.
Mm. So let's start by looking at it physically. When would you reach for Angelica?
A lot. So I was going to use a prop. Here is my prop. So it's easiest to understand Angelica through doctrine of signatures. Um, so those of you who don't know doctrine of signatures, the most famous proponent of it was Paracelsus in the 15th century, and what he talks about is that there are signatures in plants that sometimes give away what that plant will do. So actually, I should say, if you do you even know what an Angelica plant looks like?
I believe. I've seen pictures before. It kind of has a big splattering of flowers above it, doesn't it? A stalk and big splattering of flowers.
Yeah, so that's in Angelica sinensis. Sorry, Angelica Angelica sinensis is much smaller.
Mm.
So garden Angelica, let's be easy with this, uh, grows to be absolutely humongous, around about 8 foot tall, and has this enormous spread of, yes, it's an umbellifera or an apiarchy, depending on old classification or new. So yeah, like an umbrella. And then on each flower, there's two little seeds. So it's a biennial. So the first year that it grows, I don't do a great deal, but you have this beautiful shoot that comes up. It's like we say yellow, but more like a chartreuse color, that sort of beginning of spring yellowy green color. It sprouts forth and the leaves go like a beautiful flying bird. And then you have this lots and lots and lots of leaves for the first year. And then the second year, you have this huge stem that comes up with these yellow flowers on top. So this is my moving up to the stem. So Doctrine of Signatures talks about the stem a lot because, and this is a good prop, like it's hollow like a pen is, and how it is faceted around the sides. And plants that have that hollow stem and that faceting are good for things in the body that are similar to that. So the tubules of the body. So anything that fluid moves through is helped by Angelica. So importantly, we will say the lungs, the circulation, the urinary tracts, the lymphatic system. So anything that moves fluid through, that's a place you will use Angelica. And the reason for that is it has this sort of melting effect on things that are sticky or stuck. And interestingly, if you break the stem, it has a sticky sap that will burn you. So it even has that stickiness in the plant. So most importantly, actually, so maybe you wouldn't know this, in England, it was used a lot in cakes when I was a little girl, and older than that, we had candied Angelica. So on your birthday cake, you would always have glacé cherries, which are like bright red, and then candied Angelica to make the stalks. And they've got like an aniseedy taste. So they are really good for digestion, and in particular for slow digestion and for problems with peristalsis. So perhaps the most interesting thing about Angelica is as it moves things through the body, it's stimulating to the body, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it stimulates everything. So what you'll get is the peristalsis speeds up, so you can go to the toilet more, you can wee more, but also then you stop having like that liver congestion, those headaches, all of those things that come with the toxicity of slowness. So we talked about how it stimulates. It's a very unusual medicine in that the energetics are odd. So whereas you would use something like peppermint to stimulate the body, you would also stimulate the mind when you did that. And likewise, if you use lavender to calm the body, your mind will calm too. Angelica is different. It stimulates the body, but calms the mind. So if somebody has had long-term stress or is incapacitated after medical treatment and is in a weakened state, then we get this stimulation of the body, so start wanting to eat again, for example, but also the body stays calm, because if you use something like peppermint on somebody in that kind of weakened state, sometimes it can just be agitating, they're not, not naturally wanting, they don't want to be anything but calm, but you want their body to be stimulated. And Angelica does that. This applies to the root and the seed. So another way that it can be really helpful is if there is spasm in the body. So, for example, gastric spasm, colic, any kind of diarrhea where it's going like that. But also bronchial spasm, so things like asthma, all of those things kind of relax down. Another area that I use it for a lot is nasty periods. And by nasty, I mean ones that are painful, but excuse the graphic nature, ones that are really clotted, and problems with fibroids where there's this thick blood and it's very painful to secrete. It slows it really sort of loosens it and lets it flow more easily. And in the same way, if somebody, I've had people, when I first started my job, I used to do quite a lot of work with the fertility centre, and supporting people there. And one of the things that people would often come to me for was that their menstrual cycle wasn't regular. So that's important, because once you have secreted the egg from the fallopian tube, what makes progesterone, the ovaries make progesterone, but progesterone's also made from the actual eggshell, the corpus luteum. So as the corpus luteum breaks down, that secretes progesterone, and you need to have a decent, I'll use the word period, wrong use, but a decent period of time for that to raise enough progesterone. So if somebody's got a short cycle, then that makes it very hard for fertility. And the Angelica oils are really good for being able to make that 29-day cycle, the perfect number cycle. The problem that you have with it is that obviously as soon as you're pregnant, you want to stop using essential oils, and particularly this one. This is not one that you would want to use in pregnancy. So I always say to people, if you're doing that kind of work and you're trying to get your cycle into shape, do it before you go start having your treatment, because otherwise it's a very expensive mistake to make, emotionally and financially expensive, because what Angelica root will do is contract the uterus. So traditional herbalism uses it to help expel the placenta. So you certainly don't want to be using that at the beginning of a period. What else?
I love that, how you kind of gave that analogy that I find is really helpful. Just anywhere where there's a tube in our body where things are not flowing through it as it should, whether it be blood, whether it be digestive, whether it be the female reproductive system, the urinary system, that's where you reach for your Angelica. Now, I'm guessing topical use would be the best way for all these kind of challenges we might have.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But it kind of, there's lots of different ways to do that topical use. So, for example, if you had got these stomach problems that we've talked about, yes, you could use it diluted into some carrier oil and massage it on and do an abdominal massage, which I'm a big fan of. But also, you could do a compress or on the tummy. So, soaking a warm cloth in some warm water with a few drops of essential oil and then squeezing it out, or putting, the other way I like to do it is to put the massage oil on with the carrier oil onto the area, and then put the compress on top, or put a hot water bottle on top. So it really pushes it through. So compresses are really helpful for that kind of thing, particularly for the painful periods. You know, it really helps just kind of relax everything while the oil does the job.
And with its ability to stimulate the body but relax the mind, I got it the right way around, didn't I? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. I think about how many people are feeling challenged with things such as exhaustion, burnout, and fatigue. would Angelica work well in these situations as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where somebody, well, I'm in this place now after having been looking after my husband being ill for such a long time now. I can't stop, but I can't stop doing what I've got to do because he is really poorly, and this is what happens when somebody's so ill. So it's really good for carers. It's really good also for the people that are sick because it really calms the mind down. It stops you worrying about what's coming ahead. Actually, it's something that is used a lot in hospice care because it's very good for transitions and for easing the heart, but also, well, we've talked about how there's like a tube. Think about how there's the analogy of the tunnel, you know, that
Yeah.
you're going to be looking for the light at the end. There's still that kind of medicine that comes that we take away any blockages so there's a smooth transition through.
Hmm. Now, obviously, with its name Angelica, are you aware of anywhere where it's worked its way into mythology or being linked to the actual angels at all?
Yes. Are you asking me because you know one or not?
No, I don't on this one. As I said, I'm not much use this week. I can talk a little bit about the spiritual aspects and what I find it to be really good
What
for,
am I do
but
rubbish? I'll just do it. I'll just do it all this week. Do
I might go out and have a coffee and I'll come back.
it. Do it.
Yeah.
Actually, so this is one that's stuck in my mind because when I read it, I was like, that is really wrong. How can that be true? So they think that there's sort of several stories around it. The first is that they think that it's associated with the archangel Michael because it blossoms around about May the 8th. Now, when I was like, really? I didn't think St. Michael's Day was May the 8th. I thought it was in September. And I looked it up and it is September 29th. So I was about to debunk it. And then I looked again. I was like, no, there is a specific feast of Saint Michael of somewhere, Monte somewhere in Italy, where it was believed that there was an intercession where St. Michael appeared and helped defeat an invading army. So that is why it's celebrated on May the 8th. And because it blooms on that day, then there's that association. But also there is a story that a monk in the 15th century had an apparition from St. Michael, who told him that he should use Angelica to be able to treat the people of the bubonic plague. And interestingly, they think that's one of the reasons why there's so much more Angelica archangelica than sinensis, because the paupers probably round here went and foraged so much of the sinensis to that it just brought the natural levels right down. It doesn't really grow here wild anymore. But the medicine was to put a stick of a stem of into your mouth and to hold it into your mouth for the day. So how they didn't retch, I don't know. But there is a lot of evidence now about how it boosts the immune system. So that, if that was true, that they had that apparition, that's really interesting. So, but also there are some suggestions that it may have been the Archangel Gabriel. It's not written anywhere else, but I can't see what. It seems to me it's associated with Raphael. He's the healing archangel. Michael's the one that cuts, that is the defender, you know. But the ancient medicine. So if you look at like really old texts for India, going back to like the Rig Veda, all the others are gone now out of my head, but we're going about 5,000 years back, and they do cite it and they use it ritually. And ritually means a different thing back then than it does now, because it was before the divide between medicine and religion. So they would burn the root, and they believed that they were protected against all kinds of spirits. So that would be germs, but also malefic entities. And that would be the job of Archangel Michael in that situation. So I think that's probably where the association comes from.
And as an oil, I do find that it is a really good one for that kind of cleansing and protecting type of energy as well. So if you pop in a diffuser or in a spritzer for that, really, really great.
Yeah, agreed. And Deborah Eisden talks about it in her book, which is called, I think, Vibrational Aromatherapy or something like that. But she talks about using it on the heart chakra, and she talks about how good it is for self-love, and also not being angry at your soul's journey. So we all go through these times where, particularly at the moment, for obvious reasons, I think about how the body derails us from what we want to do. But it can be any entity within our life. It can be our emotions, whatever, derailing us from it. And it's very easy, particularly if you get a disease, to be angry at that disease. And Angelica root on the heart chakra, she says to put it on the front and the back of the heart chakra, to allow this sort of integration between the subtle bodies and the physical bodies to start to understand. But you're learning something from this. You know, this is something important to you. This is not you being derailed. This is part of the soul journey. You were supposed to come here to learn from that. And so Angelica opens it to go, and so what are you learning? Also, I think Angelica is very good at going, so what part did you play in that, do you think? So sometimes we can go through times where we blame everything, blame the universe. One of my favourite statements is, the universe is kicking me in the ass. And Angelica goes, and where were you in that, please?
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's very helpful, because I have to be like, shift my perspective and go, yeah, okay. So if somebody's got a victim tendency, that's very good. Another suggested use that I've seen written, although I've never used it for this, and I can't attest to it, but there's several people written about alcoholism, that it will curb the desire for alcohol, but also for the people who are codependent, that idea of, what are you getting from this relationship? Because we all say, oh, it's always a toxic relationship, and it is usually a toxic relationship, but codependency goes two ways. And part of the healing of the family is to understand, well, why am I engaging in that? And Angelica is said to be good for that.
I love that idea of how it can help with not being angry at your soul's journey. Really, really interesting, because, like you said, we often, if we're sick or if the body can't keep up with what the mind wants to do, there is that sense of frustration. So I think that this oil's been identified as helping with that, gives it great value. What I also love about it is, obviously it does help us connect with the angelic realms, whether that be Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, or whoever. But especially being a root oil, it brings that guidance down. And I think sometimes, you hear the term Sunday Christians, where people go to church on a Sunday, they're very holy for their hour that they're in church, and then they're complete asses for the rest of the week, kind of thing. And I think sometimes, regardless of whether you're religious or spiritual, sometimes we can be Sunday spiritualists as well, where we go to our sister circles or our whatever it may be type of things, and we get into all our spirituality, but how do we integrate that into our everyday life? So whether it be the lessons we gain from our spiritual community, or what we learn from working with the oils in a spiritual way, how do we actually integrate that into our real life? Because the real spiritual test in this lifetime isn't about, can I sit on top of a mountaintop and become enlightened? It's, can you be in the middle of a busy train and maintain your inner peace in that kind of chaos? And I think Angelica root is really good at helping you to kind of assimilate that. And that kind of does take me to another use I find it really good for us country folk who aren't used to being around city people all the time, of helping us just to kind of cleanse away the overwhelmingness of, being around a large group of people if that's not what we do every day as well. So I love it for that kind of real grounded type of nature.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting actually that I said about alcoholism because it is in a lot of different uh, cocktails. No, aperitifs. So I talked about how it was Chartreuse colour. It's in
Yes.
Chartreuse drink, which is around about 130 different botanicals, I think. It's also in Benedictine, and another one that's gone out my head, but famous ones. And I've forgotten what my point was after that. Anyway, so but it's interesting how it has that pathway between problem and solution.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? So it obviously works well with alcohol in one way. Oh, I know that's what I was going to say. But also, it has that relationship with sun. So it's a very, very bright, radiant plant. And those plants that have got phototoxicity issues usually have a huge amount of sun in them. So
Mm.
so for example, taking it completely off this oil, you can get bergamot FCF for an acromorant free, and that one has no problems with phototoxicity. I absolutely hate it to see that listed for people who have got depression because the sunshine's just gone out of it.
Yeah.
It's just this beautiful radiance. So it is like the light at the end of the tunnel. So when we're talking about death, but also when we're talking about depression, I read, I don't know where I read it. It probably is Valerie Ann Warwood, but I don't know. I can't remember where I did. But she talked about the personality of somebody who was an Angelica type or somebody who needs Angelica as somebody who has lost the light in their life and they've lost spirituality in their life. They cannot feel it at all. And so therefore it's hard for them to see joy. And so if you give this idea of you're using the root of the Holy Ghost for somebody like that, suddenly this beautiful medicine of just angels lifting them out of the mire is very strong.
Yeah, wow, I love that. It's really kind of stepping forward, I think, as this oil that um allows, like when we're talking about alcohol and alcoholism, how do we find that's just like we're talking about the body being ill, that sometimes these things come into our lives to teach us a lesson that if we make it through the tunnel to the light at the end of it, then we come out stronger, wiser, and a more experienced human being than living a sheltered life. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And we talked earlier about the stalk being like tubule, but we talked about how it's a yellow plant, but the stalk is purple. It's like a
Mm,
reddy purple colour. And so straight away we think, oh, that's the circulation. That's your blood supply. But
yeah.
also that's the upper chakras. That's
Mm,
quiet nature of the quietening the third eye down, quietening the crown down, so that it is just very gentle energy going through rather than right, I'm pushing that open. I'm going
yeah.
to really actively do that work. No, it's just descending like the dove.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I find it really, really helpful for is anyone who's interested in doing a bit of past life work. Angelica root could be, I guess I've really I love this idea of tunneling. That it takes us journaling through any kind of tunnel, and that could be a tunnel through time to go back where we were in past lives, the healing of that, the lessons of that. It's interesting. I'm sure you've had this experience as well, Liz, that you meet people who recall a past life experience and use that as an excuse for their poor behavior today. Oh, sorry,
No,
I'm not good at
I never
I'm
have.
not good at relationships because I was killed by a man, 200 years
Okay, yeah, I
ago.
see what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
Do you know what I mean? That type of
I do
thing. So
know.
I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah.
it really helps us to kind of take that lesson wherever that lesson comes from a past life, from our body, from an addiction, from the angels, and however they deliver that, and move us through to the light at the end of the day.
Entirely agreed. And I've actually written in one of something that I've written in the past that it helps integrate past lives and
Mm,
past life experiences. And by that, I mean past lives, but also experiences from this life. And being able to, so when you're doing journaling with this kind of oil and really sitting with it, it's very good at being able to go, okay, that's a pattern. Oh, that's an interesting pattern. I'm going, this cycle is coming back and over and over and over again. And if you look at Culpeper, he says it is an oil of the sun, but it's specifically for problems of Saturn, and Saturn is karma. This idea of coming back, it's coming back again. We haven't learned it yet. We need to integrate it. And yeah, sometimes these karmic lessons can turn up as disease.
very much. Yeah, definitely. I must admit, when we're talking about the aroma of it earlier on, where it takes me, where it journeys me to, is I think we've all walked into an old kind of Chinese medicine store before, where they've got all the shelves and shelves of herbs and herbs. That's what the Angelica root smells like to me.
That's because that's not quite. That's not what
That's the Don
ours.
Quiet smell. I need to get myself some of the Angelica, obviously, and start working with that as well.
That doesn't smell the same. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah, the Don Quai really does have that kind of, and I think because Don Quai is prevalent in China, if you are doing past life work and you feel that you've got past lives, especially in the East, the Don Quai can be really, really good for that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the fun of, the deeper we dive into essential oils, we keep on finding new and wonderful essential oils. And so, I've been working with one Angelica, but you've shared a bit more about this one that now I've got to collect the set.
Yes, but we do have two junkies in the room here.
We do. And just to kind of titillate everyone who loves a bit of a rare oil, I discovered a brand new. We're going totally off topic now, but I discovered a brand new oil last night.
Exciting.
Moldovan dragon head.
No way. Do we know anything about that?
No, I bought myself some. It's obviously a little while away. Similar aroma to Melissa, helps with digestion. Yeah, we'll have
Oh,
to maybe we'll have to both get a hand for that and do an episode on that one. But
yeah, that
uh,
seems a bit banal for a plant that can be that excite with such an exciting name.
dragon head, yeah. So
Yeah.
it could be a nice empowerment oil, but it's a purple flower plant. So yeah, check it out.
Interesting.
Maybe we'll have to
How many
dive
petals?
into that.
Do you know how many petals it's got?
I remember looking at it. It's not a kind of like the flower is kind of a complex looking flower that could look a bit like a dragon if you closed one eye and squinted through the other kind of
Ah,
thing. So
right. Yeah,
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 it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
longer and tubular and kind of could look like a dragon's face. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
whoever's
exciting.
selling that oil, I should buy shares in that because everyone's going to
Yeah,
try and.
just thank you for
I
the
bought it
plug.
from somewhere in Europe, so I'm traveling to Europe next month. So I sent it to my friend in the Netherlands, and I'll pick it up there because it's a lot cheaper than sending it to
Perfect.
Australia. So yeah, so there we go. But yes, that's a wonderful thing about essential oils is there is always new ones to discover, and although sometimes their chemistry will double up, I think on an energetic level, and that's obviously what we love talking about as well. That's where they really separate, and that's where I'll argue that why do we need 12 citrus oils? Because their energies are all very different, even though they may be just limonene bearing oils type of thing.
Yeah, but we don't need them all the time.
No, 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 no. But we have to have them all in our collection just in case we need them all the time.
No, just in case.
So with Angelica root, let's talk about chakras. Where would you place it for chakras, personally?
um, well, definitely crown and heart, but also actually third eye.
Okay. Yep. I'm going to go a lot deeper than that. I'm going to go beyond the base, even Earth Star, the Incarnator chakra, which is said to help connect us to our ancestry, our clan, our our heritage, and that type of thing as well. I feel because of that rootedness that I've worked with the Angelica root, it definitely it's not just a base chakra one. It's definitely a lower that Earth Star, Incarnator, that type of thing. Planetary wise, where would you put it?
I'm going to agree with Culpepper that Sun.
The sun. Yeah.
Sun and Venus. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to talk specifically about Don Quiet, and for me, that's got more of an ancient, more peaceful, more of a moon, a moon. I was going to say a mooner energy,
Amuna, I expect.
a moon lunar energy. That would work really well with that. But hey, I might have to come back in a few episodes and kind of review what I think of Angelica, Archangelica.
Yes, definitely. I definitely recommend it. It is an oil that I really love using. And especially if you've got old people around you. So we didn't really talk about, but what I call winterfulness. So, when you get a bit congested in the cold, or somebody's
Mm.
just getting like rheumatism or gout, or those kind of toxic situations that come from just slowing down, and people are getting frail, then it's a great jolting oil.
Yeah. Okay. I've got lots of uses, and I'm going to wrap up this episode because I've got to jump on and do some shopping.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. We hope that we've enlightened you a little bit more with the oil of the angels, Angelica. We'll be back next week to dive into another essential oil. We'll see you then. Goodbye.
Bye bye.